Joining us now is Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut. Senator Murphy, thank you very much for being here tonight. I really appreciate you being here on short notice.
Sure.
As you heard there, I feel like the question that we have to sort of contend with right now is whether it's better or worse if this was an accident, if the president-elect is ignorant of the sensitivities here and of what this might mean for our relationship with the other most powerful nation on earth, or whether this is just real off-the-hook radicalism, a huge change in American foreign policy that he means deliberately, and he's just doing it while President Obama is still in office without regard for what that means. Which do you think it is?
Well, I tend to think it's the first, especially given the context. This wasn't just today's phone call with the president of Taiwan. It was also a breezy invitation to the president of Philippines to come visit the United States after a year in which he's ordered or at least condoned the extrajudicial killing of thousands of his civilians. It was a call with the head of the Pakistani government in which he suggested that the U.S. would be there to help Pakistan with all of its problems, including maybe its major territorial dispute over Kashmir with India. It sort of suggests that there's a pattern here of him saying things in these diplomatic conversations that have real impact without having thought through them. I guess, to give him the most credit, there is something in between a mistake and a very well thought out strategic change in American policy towards Taiwan. He might just be trying to, purposefully get a dig at China because of all the other things that we have on the table. That's no more palatable in that we do have much bigger fish to fry with China, whether it be our economic issues, climate change, or this messy problem of a nuclear North Korea. The idea that you would ding them on Taiwan, making it less likely that you'll get a settlement on these other issues, would be a very strange way to approach your first conversations with this country. So there's really no good option here. I tend to think, given the context of the last few days, that this was probably just someone who didn't know what he was doing. And given that we've had sort of 3 mistakes in 48 hours, it doesn't suggest that this is going to get much better.
And if it is the latter, taking that sort of most charitable view that he understands what a big provocation this is to China, he meant to do it, it's on purpose, he has some strategic goal in mind behind it, is it appropriate to start down that path, to pick this fight with China, to mark this change in our relationship with China and with Taiwan, while there is another U.S. president who's still in office, who's in charge of U.S. foreign policy?
Well, of course not. And he is right in his last tweet tonight to remind us that, this is maybe one of the most complicated diplomatic and military relationships we have, right? It is strange that our presidents don't talk, and yet we sell weapons to them. And it is strange that the relationship is built upon 3 communiques and 6 principles and a U.S.-Taiwan Relations Act. But that's the point. It's one of the most complicated relationships we have. And so it takes a lot of thought if you are going to deviate from the place we are today. And if he is just trying to dig China, and ultimately he's going to abandon the Taiwanese and do a deal with China on North Korea or on some economic issue, that's just as problematic because it signals that he's going to play games with countries in order to get something from somebody else. And that's how alliances and treaties break down. So there's really no good way to read this tonight. And it suggests that we're in for a really, really bumpy road.
Senator, you mentioned at the top that this is one of 3 basically big mistakes, or at least very reckless things that he's done in international phone calls over the last 48 hours, not just this, let's say, maybe unintentional provocation of China, but also inviting himself to Pakistan. There's a reason that President Obama has not gone to Pakistan since he has been president of the United States. Obviously one of the most sensitive countries on earth, nuclear armed, an incredibly tense relationship with our very close ally India, who's also nuclear armed, a lot of tensions around like the bin Laden raid and all of those things. So there's the Pakistan issue. There's also this invitation that he's apparently extended to the president of the Philippines, who, as you said, is implicated in thousands of killings since he's been in office, who also, incidentally, and I'm sorry for the language here, called the president of the United States very recently a son of a whore. And And the president-elect has now invited him to come to the White House. Is that the sort of thing that on the Foreign Relations Committee you'd expect to have input in if he really did try to go through with visiting Pakistan, with having the Philippine president come to the White House?
Well, I think herein lies the problem. I mean, we still have 48 votes in the United States Senate as Democrats, and that does provide us the ability to have a check on a lot of domestic policy. Some of the worst things he's proposed, like building a wall with Mexico, probably can't come true because we can stop it in the Senate. The checks and balances don't work as well when it comes to foreign policy, right? He has the ability as the commander-in-chief to travel anywhere he wants. He has certain abilities to enter into treaty negotiations, to impose or lift sanctions unchecked by the United States Congress. So I think that's why many of us worry. And I used some strong words today. I said that this is how wars start. I admit that it's not likely that any of these three mistakes that we're talking about here today are going to immediately lead to a war breaking out. But this foreign policy freestyling at the rate that we've seen today, given the law of averages, will eventually lead to something very terrible happening, which is why it might be about time to get a Secretary of State who knows what they're talking about in place.
Senator Chris Murphy of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. I know we wrangled you on short notice tonight when this all started happening, sir. Thanks for being here on a Friday night. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Rachel.